My name is Clara Bennett, and for most of my life, my family had already decided who I was before I ever opened my mouth. My older sister Lily was the beautiful one, my brother Ethan was the genius, and me. I was the unfortunate-looking one, not in a cruel, screaming way, worse, in the casual family joke way, the kind that gets repeated so often people stop realizing it's abuse. Last summer, at our annual Bennett family reunion, my aunt introduced me to a stranger by saying, "This is the daughter nobody talks about." I was standing right there, 33 years old, holding a paper plate of potato salad, surrounded by 42 relatives pretending that sentence was normal. But what none of them knew was that the woman beside me wasn't some random guest. And what happened after that sentence changed the way my family looked at me forever. I was 6 years old the first time I understood I ranked last in my own family, not fully understood. Children don't have language for emotional hierarchy yet, they just feel it. It was a Sunday afternoon in June. My mother was sewing matching dresses for all the girls in the family before a church picnic. My cousins got new floral prints. Lily got pale blue satin with lace sleeves. Even my aunt's stepdaughter got a custom ribbon belt. I got Lily's old Easter dress, yellow, too tight around the shoulders. A brown stain near the collar my mother never bothered cleaning. "People won't notice it from far away," she said distractedly while pinning Lily's hem. God, that sentence stayed with me for years, not because of the stain. Because she assumed nobody would look closely at me anyway. At the picnic, Aunt Brenda cupped Lily's face dramatically and announced, "This girl is going to break hearts someday." Then she turned toward me, tilted her head slightly, and laughed. Poor Clara got the Bennett nose. Everyone chuckled softly, even my mother. God, I still remember that laugh, not loud, not malicious, just comfortable, like the entire family had silently agreed this was acceptable. I stood there holding a paper cup of lemonade in a dress that smelled like attic dust and realized something important very early. Some children grow up being seen, others grow up being evaluated. The labels settled into place after that. Lily was pretty, Ethan was brilliant. I became the one people explained away politely. Birthday parties proved it best. Lily got themed parties every year, princess party at 7. Pool party at 11, professional photographer at 16. My birthdays got attached to Ethan's. Shared cake, shared decorations, shared presents sometimes. Every year my name looked squeezed onto the cake afterward like an afterthought. Happy birthday ETHAN and CLARA, except Clara was always written smaller. Tiny detail. Massive message. Christmas mornings weren't better. Lily unwrapped carefully chosen outfits. Designer boots, matching jewelry sets. Ethan got science kits, robotics equipment, a telescope one year that cost more than my mother's car payment. I got books, not because I asked for books, because my mother decided reading fit the role she assigned me. "You like quiet things," she'd say. Interesting, because eventually families stop asking who you are, they start handing you identities instead. And if you live there long enough, you begin wearing them just to survive. By middle school, family photos became unbearable. My mother treated them like magazine shoots. Lily front and center, Ethan next to grandma. Clara moved back a little, always back, one step, then another. Until eventually I learned how to disappear before anyone asked. At Lily's high school graduation, my mother took 53 photos. I know because I counted later while helping upload them. Different angles, different poses. Crying photos, laughing photos. At my graduation 2 years later, she took one single blurry photo while someone walked in front of the camera. I graduated second in my class. Nobody framed the picture. That summer, I bought myself a disposable Kodak camera from the pharmacy downtown. And honestly, that tiny camera changed something inside me because I started documenting my own life. My first apartment, my architecture sketches, my first drafting table, my college acceptance letter. When nobody else records your existence, you learn to become your own witness. I left home at 18 with a scholarship to State University's architecture program. My mother reacted exactly the way she reacted to everything involving me, with disappointment disguised as concern. "Architecture is very competitive for someone like you. Someone like you, God." My mother could fit entire insults inside 4-word sentences. At the time, I didn't understand why architecture upset her specifically. That answer came years later, but my father drove me to campus himself. 3-hour drive. Windows down, radio off. Dad wasn't cruel like the others, just quiet. The kind of quiet men become after spending decades inside houses where louder personalities decide reality for everyone. When we reached the dorm building, he carried my suitcase upstairs silently. Then before leaving, he looked at me and said 6 words I never forgot. Build something they can't ignore. God, that sentence built half my life afterward. Because for the first time, someone in my family sounded like they believed I could become something important. I hugged him tightly in the parking lot, and interestingly, he held on longer than usual. Then he drove away. And honestly, watching his truck disappear down the road felt less painful than staying home ever did. College felt like oxygen, not because life suddenly became easy, because for the first time, nobody already knew who I was supposed to be. At home, every version of me came pre-written. At school, I got to introduce myself before anyone attached a label. That changes a person. My roommate Tessa was from Chicago and spoke so quickly the first week I only understood about 70% of what she said. But she asked me questions constantly, real questions. What kind of buildings do you like? What got you into architecture? Why do you sketch churches so much? God, I didn't even know how to answer at first. Nobody at home had ever cared enough to ask. I worked constantly during college, library assistant during mornings, campus diner 3 nights a week, freelance drafting jobs online whenever I could find them. By sophomore year, I slept about 4 hours a night. But honestly, exhaustion felt better than invisibility. My first major project happened junior year during an unpaid preservation internship. An old train station in rural Pennsylvania was scheduled for demolition. Collapsed roof, broken windows. Town council already approved the teardown. Most people saw a dead building. I saw bones, potential. History still trying to survive. So I spent 3 weeks building a restoration proposal nobody asked me for. 38 pages, budget breakdowns, structural diagrams, grant opportunities. I presented it to the council wearing the only blazer I owned. Black, slightly too big, sleeves rolled twice. The council voted 6-1 to save the station. God, I still remember sitting in my car afterward gripping the steering wheel because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not because I won, because for the first time people listened when I spoke. That train station became the first thing I ever restored. And honestly, I think part of me restored myself alongside it. By 27, I had my own preservation studio, 3 employees, tiny office above a bakery downtown, leaking ceiling every spring. I loved it completely. We restored old libraries, historic courthouses, churches small towns couldn't afford to lose, buildings everyone else gave up on. Interesting pattern, honestly. My family barely noticed any of it. I stopped sharing accomplishments after one Thanksgiving disaster 3 years earlier. I mentioned an article written about one of my projects. My mother nodded politely and said, "That's nice. Lily and Mark just bought a lake house." Conversation over. God. Some families can turn your biggest achievement into background noise in under 5 seconds. So eventually, I stopped volunteering information, not to punish them, to protect myself. Then came the attic discovery. I was 16 when I found the sketchbooks. Half day at school, nobody home, rain hammering the roof while I searched the attic for old history books Dad mentioned. That's when I found the box labeled DIANE, college, my mother's name. Inside sat 3 spiral sketchbooks. Green covers, dust along the edges, architectural drawings on every page. And God, they were incredible, not student good, professional good, Victorian storefronts, structural cross-sections. Church steeples with handwritten load-bearing calculations in the margins. Page after page after page. My mother had studied architecture before getting pregnant with Lily at 19. Then she quit school, married my father. Never drew another building again. I sat cross-legged in the attic staring at those sketches while rain hit the roof overhead and finally understood something devastating. Every time I succeeded in architecture, my mother didn't see a daughter. She saw the life she lost. God, that realization changed everything, not because it excused her cruelty, because suddenly it made sense. I carefully put the sketchbooks back exactly where I found them, and I never told her. Some truths are too fragile to survive exposure. Years passed. My business grew quietly. magazine features, preservation awards, historic commissions across 4 states. Meanwhile, my family remained exactly the same. Lily posted filtered beach photos online beside captions about gratitude and blessings. My mother worshipped every update publicly. Ethan moved to Seattle and called twice a year. And me, I became successful in silence. Then my father had a stroke. Minor, thankfully, limited damage to his left side. But when I got the hospital call, I drove 4 hours immediately. Of course I did. Because despite everything, Dad was still the only person in that family who ever looked at me like I mattered. I stayed 3 days helping organize medications, insurance forms, doctor schedules. And that's when I found the folder. Bottom drawer of Dad's desk. Thick manila folder wrapped in a rubber band. Inside, every article ever written about me, every single one. Newspaper clippings, award announcements, printed architecture blogs, photos of restored buildings, magazine interviews, 8 years worth. Some internet printouts had gigantic URLs stretched across the page, meaning my father manually typed them from his slow home computer. Character by character. God. I sat on the office floor holding that folder like it might fall apart in my hands. Because suddenly, everything complicated about my father made painful sense. He saw me, he just never fought loudly enough for me. Dad caught me holding the folder later that night. He froze in the doorway. We stared at each other silently for several seconds. Then he nodded once, small, almost embarrassed. God, my father never said the words out loud. But he kept the receipts. The Bennett family reunion happened every July at my grandmother's old farmhouse outside Hadley. Even after Grandma died, my mother insisted on continuing it every year, not because she loved tradition. Because she loved audiences, 40 relatives minimum, homemade desserts lined perfectly across folding tables, family photo sessions organized like political campaigns. And every single year, everyone slid back into their assigned roles. Lily the admired one, Ethan the successful one, my mother the exhausted saint, and me, background furniture I hadn't attended in 2 years. This time I only came because my father asked. After the stroke, something about him changed. He moved slower now, walked with a cane, spent more time watching people than speaking to them. Like surviving something physical finally made him notice the emotional damage too. Come this year, he said quietly during a phone call. It'd mean a lot, so I came. At the same time, something major was happening professionally. For 3 months, Nora Whitmore, the senior editor at American Heritage Architecture magazine, had been interviewing me for a major feature story. Not a tiny article. A cover story, national release. She wanted my preservation work as the centerpiece for an entire issue about restoring forgotten American towns. Honestly, it still felt unreal. We exchanged emails constantly. Project photos. Interview notes, building histories. A week before the reunion, I casually mentioned I'd be in Hadley for a family gathering. Nora replied, interesting coincidence. I'll actually be nearby photographing the old train depot. I didn't think much about it. People say things all the time they never actually do. That Saturday afternoon arrived brutally hot. The kind of heat where the air itself feels tired. I parked along the gravel driveway and sat inside my car for almost 2 minutes before getting out. Counting breaths, in for 4, out for 6. A therapist taught me that years ago. Honestly, family events felt like emotional combat zones sometimes. The yard already overflowed with people, kids screaming through sprinklers. Country music playing too loudly, smoke rising from the grill near the fence. And immediately, the greetings told the entire story. Lily arrived 5 minutes after me. The reaction looked like a celebrity entering a red carpet event. Lily, oh my God, look at you. You haven't aged at all. Mom practically floated toward her. Meanwhile, I stepped from my car carrying a bowl of pasta salad and got, oh, hi Clara, God. 33 years old and somehow still emotionally seated at the children's table. Literally, actually, emotionally. Near the entrance sat a folding table covered with name tags. Every family member already had one written out neatly in my mother's handwriting. Except mine. Mine was blank, just an empty sticker beside a marker. Interesting, 42 people expected. Only one person forgot. I wrote my own name carefully. Clara, then stuck it to my shirt like a visitor at a conference nobody expected to attend. At lunch, seating cards covered the main tables beneath the tent. Diane, Lily, Marcus, Aunt Branda, Ethan. I searched every table twice. No Clara, not one. Eventually, I sat at the overflow folding table beside 3 children throwing potato chips at each other, and honestly, nobody noticed. From the kids' table, I watched my mother lean toward Lily, admiring vacation photos from their new lake house. Quartz countertops, boat dock, stone fireplace. "Your taste is just incredible," Mom said proudly. I ate my hamburger silently. A distant cousin sat beside me halfway through lunch. "So what do you do again?" Before I could answer, Aunt Brenda called loudly from the main table. "She fixes old buildings or something." Or something. God, I'd restored 11 historic structures across 4 states, but sure, or something. "I'm an architect," I corrected quietly. Brenda waved dismissively. "Right, like those renovation shows on TV." My mother immediately redirected the conversation. "Lily, show everyone the beach photos." And just like that, I disappeared again. Honestly, the exhausting part about emotional neglect isn't cruelty, it's repetition. The constant tiny reminders that your existence sits lower on everyone's priority list. After lunch, people drifted inside, flipping through old family photo albums. 3 giant binders filled with decades of memories. Or at least certain people's memories. Remember Lily's pageant? Remember Ethan's science fair? Oh my God, Lily was such a beautiful child. Page after page after page. I counted nearly 200 photographs. I appeared in four. In one, half my face got blocked by someone's thumb. In another, I stood partially hidden behind a cousin. In a third, I looked like I wandered accidentally into the frame. The fourth stopped me completely. I was 10 years old, standing behind a giant potted fern wearing another hand-me-down dress. Nobody in the picture looked at me, not one person. God. I stared at that photo for almost a full minute, then quietly slipped it from the album and put it in my pocket. Because honestly, if nobody else planned to keep proof I existed, I would. I escaped to my grandmother's old study afterward just to breathe. The room smelled like dust and old books, boxes stacked everywhere, winter coats hanging from curtain rods, old sewing supplies untouched for years. That's when I noticed another cardboard box near the bookshelf. Dad, family photos. I pulled it down curiously and froze. Inside sat 15 photographs from my college graduation. 15 different angles, different moments. Me holding my diploma, me laughing beside my roommate. Me standing in sunlight smiling directly at the camera. God. My mother took 1 photo that day. My father took 15. Disposable Kodak camera, same yellow kind I used myself. None of the photos were framed, none displayed publicly. He kept them hidden inside this dusty box for 12 years. I sat on the floor staring at 22-year-old me smiling openly into the camera and realized something devastating. I was never ugly. I was just photographed by people determined not to see me clearly. I slipped the graduation photos into my bag beside the picture of 10-year-old me behind the fern. My pockets were starting to feel heavy with evidence. Outside, the reunion continued like nothing had changed. Children screamed through sprinklers. Ice shifted inside coolers. My aunt argued loudly about potato salad proportions with someone near the grill. The same choreography. The same roles. The same invisible script my family had followed for decades. Except this time, someone else was about to see it too. Around 5:00 p.m., a silver sedan pulled slowly into the gravel driveway. Out of state plates. A woman stepped out wearing a linen blazer and carrying a leather portfolio case. Professional, composed, completely out of place among folding chairs and paper plates. Nora Whitmore. God, she actually came. She spotted me immediately beneath the oak tree near my father's chair and smiled warmly. Clara Bennett in her natural habitat, she joked softly. Unfortunately, Nora glanced around the yard carefully, interesting expression. Not judgment exactly, observation. Editors noticed dynamics quickly, and honestly, the dynamics in my family weren't subtle once you knew what to look for. I brought the feature layouts, she explained, lifting the portfolio. I thought we could review them together before final print approval. Here, she smiled slightly. I'm beginning to realize this may not be ideal timing. God, if only she knew. I led her toward the overflow table where I'd been sitting earlier. The kids had abandoned it for sprinklers now. Nora opened her portfolio carefully, and suddenly my entire career covered the table. Full-page magazine spreads. Professional photography, historic restoration shots, the Pennsylvania train station, the courthouse in West Virginia, the restored church in Kentucky glowing beneath sunset light. All the things my family spent years pretending weren't important enough to discuss. Nora sat beside me naturally, no hesitation, no awkwardness, and honestly, that mattered more than she probably realized. Because she chose the kids' table too. Aunt Brenda noticed us first. Of course she did. Women like Brenda treat unfamiliar situations the way neighborhood cats treat sudden noises, immediately suspicious. She approached carrying sweet tea and her usual performance smile. "Well, hello there," she said brightly to Nora. "Are you a friend of someone's?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Brenda turned toward Nora before I could speak. Then came the sentence. "This is Clara," she laughed casually. "The daughter nobody talks about." God, time actually slowed for a second, not metaphorically, physically. I watched Nora's expression change completely. Stillness first, then sharp attention, like a camera lens suddenly focusing. Brenda laughed again lightly. "Every family has one, right?" Nobody corrected her, not my mother, not Lily, not anyone. Because that's the horrifying thing about long-term cruelty, eventually everyone around it starts treating it like weather. Nora looked at me first, then back at Brenda. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "What did you just say?" Brenda waved dismissively. "Oh, it's just family teasing. Clara's always been the quiet, plain one." Plain one. God, 33 years old and somehow still being introduced like defective furniture. My mother appeared nearby then, instantly sensing attention shifting away from her. "Who's your friend, Clara?" "Interesting." She said friend like accusation instead of curiosity. Before I could answer, Nora stood up, calmly, smoothly. And honestly, something about her posture suddenly changed the entire atmosphere around us. "I'll introduce myself in a moment," she said politely, "but I'd actually appreciate it if everyone could hear this." The yard slowly quieted. Not dramatically, gradually, music lowered, conversations paused, people turned toward us one by one, even the kids near the sprinkler slowed down. 42 relatives stared at a stranger holding a leather portfolio in the middle of the Bennett family reunion. My mother's smile froze instantly. Nora reached into her blazer pocket and removed a business card, then handed it directly to my mother. "My name is Nora Whitmore," she said evenly. "I'm the senior features editor at American Heritage Architecture magazine." Silence, real silence. The kind where you can hear ice melting in cups 20 feet away. My mother blinked twice reading the card. Nora continued calmly. "I drove here today because of your daughter." And then she pointed directly at me, not dramatically, not emotionally, matter of fact, like identifying something obvious everyone else somehow missed. God, I felt my entire chest tight. Nora opened the portfolio and lifted the first photograph. The restored courthouse in West Virginia. 3-story limestone facade glowing gold beneath evening sunlight. "This building was scheduled for demolition," Nora explained clearly. "Clara Bennett saved it." Another photograph, the Pennsylvania train station. "This restoration project won a statewide preservation award." Another photograph. The Kentucky church. 63 families signed petitions asking us to feature the architect responsible for preserving this building. She spread the photos across the table one by one. And suddenly, my entire family stared down at physical proof of a life they never bothered asking about. My mother looked completely disoriented. Lily's phone slowly lowered onto the table. Brenda stopped smiling entirely. Then Nora said the sentence that rewrote my entire place inside that family forever. "Clara Bennett is one of the most respected preservation architects working in the country today." God, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The whole yard looked stunned. Nora folded her hands lightly over the portfolio. "We're featuring her as our October cover story." Then came the final blow. Softly, politely, absolutely devastating. I assumed her family already knew. Nobody spoke for at least 5 full seconds. And honestly, those were probably the quietest 5 seconds in Bennett family history. The air itself felt stunned. My mother stared at the photographs spread across the table like someone had dumped evidence into her lap unexpectedly. Lily's expression shifted rapidly: confusion, embarrassment, annoyance, not guilt. Interesting difference. Aunt Brenda recovered first, of course. Women like Brenda survive uncomfortable moments by pretending they meant something entirely different all along. Oh, well, we've always known Clara was talented, she laughed nervously. She's just so humble about everything. God, the speed of that rewrite almost impressed me. My mother immediately joined in. We're very proud of her, she added brightly, too brightly, like someone performing pride instead of feeling it. Nora didn't say anything, and honestly, that silence was worse, because professional people recognize fake reactions instantly. Nora simply stood there watching my family reconstruct history in real time. Lily crossed her arms tightly. Well, Clara never really talks about work. There it was, the defense, not "we never asked," but she didn't volunteer enough information. Interesting how neglect always gets rewritten as secrecy afterward. I finally spoke then, quietly. I talked about the courthouse project 3 Thanksgivings ago. Lily blinked. You compared it to a house-flipping show. God, the memory landed visibly on her face, because deep down she remembered. My mother immediately interrupted. Why are we doing this publicly? Publicly. Interesting word choice from the woman who spent 30 years humiliating me in front of relatives openly. Nora closed the portfolio carefully. I don't believe Clara is doing anything publicly, she said calmly. I think she's simply existing honestly. God, that sentence hit the yard like shattered glass. Even my father looked up sharply beneath the oak tree. Brenda tried laughing again. Well, families tease each other, everyone knows that. Nora tilted her head slightly. Do they? Silence. Then softly, because introducing someone as the daughter nobody talks about didn't sound teasing to me. God. I swear even the cicadas stopped. Brenda's face flushed immediately. That was just an expression. Interesting expression. No raised voice, no aggression, just devastating, calm professionalism. Across the yard, Uncle Richard finally spoke for the first time all afternoon. Brenda, he said quietly, that's enough. God, I almost looked at him in shock, because nobody ever corrected Brenda publicly. Not once in my entire life. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. For the first time ever, Aunt Brenda looked embarrassed. Actually embarrassed. Nearby, my 16-year-old cousin Emma picked up one of the courthouse photographs carefully. You designed this? She asked me softly. I nodded, her eyes widened. This is insanely cool. God, that simple sentence nearly broke something inside me emotionally because it was so uncomplicated. No comparisons. No qualifications. No hidden insult attached, just admiration, pure and simple. Meanwhile, my mother stood frozen near the dessert table, gripping a serving spoon so tightly her knuckles whitened. And suddenly I understood something horrifying. She wasn't angry because Nora exposed me. She was angry because Nora saw through her. The architecture, the dismissal, the years of minimization. Nora unintentionally uncovered the entire emotional structure of our family in under 15 minutes. And my mother knew it. Eventually, people drifted into smaller conversations around the yard again. But the atmosphere changed permanently. Whispers spread. Relatives kept glancing toward me. A few cousins approached awkwardly asking questions about my projects. Questions they'd never bothered asking before. Interesting how strangers often need to validate your worth before family suddenly notices you have any. I stepped away eventually and walked onto the back porch just to breathe. The evening sun cast long amber light across the grass. Kids chased fireflies near the fence. Someone restarted the music quietly. Then the screen door creaked behind me. Lily, of course. She crossed her arms immediately, defensive posture, classic Lily. You could have told us about all this. God, I actually laughed softly, not cruelly, just tired. I tried, she frowned. No, I mean really told us. Interesting. Because apparently mentioning awards, projects, and published articles didn't count unless I forced everyone to care harder. I talked about my work constantly for years, I said quietly. Nobody listened? That's not fair, isn't it? Lily looked away first. And honestly, that surprised me because my sister almost never looked uncomfortable. She was beautiful, charismatic, naturally centered in every room. Discomfort wasn't a language she spoke fluently. I didn't know it mattered this much, she admitted finally. God, there it was. The sentence underneath everything. She didn't know my life mattered because nobody in the family ever acted like it did. That's the problem, Lily. She looked back at me slowly. You all decided who I was before you ever bothered finding out. The porch went silent. Then quietly, we were kids, Clara. No, I answered softly. We were kids. I looked back toward the yard, toward my mother smiling too brightly beside relatives, toward Brenda pretending nothing happened, toward 42 people suddenly trying to recalculate who I'd been all along. But we're not kids anymore. The reunion ended awkwardly, not dramatically. Honestly, that would have been easier. Instead, people left in careful waves of forced politeness and emotional confusion. Relatives hugged me too long suddenly. Cousins asked for my business card. Aunt Brenda avoided eye contact completely. Interesting how quickly respect appears once strangers validate your importance publicly. By sunset, only immediate family remained. Paper plates stacked near trash bags, half-melted ice floating inside coolers. The yard quiet again after hours of noise. Dad sat alone beneath the oak tree rubbing his cane absently. My mother cleaned already clean tables aggressively. Classic Diane Bennett behavior, scrubbing surfaces whenever emotions became inconvenient. I helped fold chairs silently until she finally snapped. You embarrassed this family today? God, there it was. Not I'm sorry, not we failed you. Embarrassed, I set the chair down slowly. Nora embarrassed you, I corrected quietly. She just noticed things everyone else ignored. Mom scoffed sharply. Oh please, you're acting like you were abused. Interesting. Families always reserve the word abuse for visible bruises, never years of humiliation disguised as humor. You introduced me as disappointing for most of my life. That is not what happened. God, that immediate denial. Like memory itself offended her personally. You called Lily beautiful constantly. Well, she was beautiful. I know, Mom froze slightly. And Ethan was brilliant, I continued softly. But every time someone described me, it came with an apology attached. Silence. My father looked up from beneath the tree slowly. Mom crossed her arms defensively. You were always sensitive. Interesting word, sensitive. The favorite weapon of people who want to hurt you without consequences. No, I answered quietly. I was observant. God, that landed, because suddenly she knew I remembered everything. The dresses, the photographs, the birthdays. The comments disguised as jokes, all of it. Mom looked away first. You always made me feel guilty. There it was. The real truth finally crawling into daylight, not that I failed her, that my existence reminded her of herself. I stared at her carefully. The sketchbooks in the attic were beautiful. Total silence. Absolute silence. Mom's entire face changed instantly, like someone cracked open a locked room inside her chest. Dad slowly lowered his cane. Lily looked between us confused. What sketchbooks? Mom's voice came out barely above a whisper. You saw those? God, not anger, fear. I nodded once. The church drawings were incredible. Mom sat down abruptly in the nearest folding chair. And honestly, she suddenly looked exhausted, not older, just tired in a way I'd never noticed before. Nobody was supposed to find them, she whispered. The yard went completely still. Then slowly, pieces finally connected out loud for the first time. You hated architecture because you loved it first, I said softly. Mom closed her eyes immediately. God, there it was. The wound underneath everything. Not my face, not my personality, my future, because every building I restored reminded her of the life she buried at 19. I gave up everything, she whispered, not to me, to herself. I had Lily. Then Ethan, then me. Interesting omission. Dad finally spoke quietly from beneath the tree. Diane, no, she shook her head sharply. No, Richard, let her hear it. Mom looked directly at me then for what felt like the first time in years. You were good at it immediately, she admitted softly. Better than I ever was. God, that sentence hit harder than cruelty ever could, because suddenly my entire childhood rearranged itself. The dismissals, the minimization. The constant comparisons, not because she thought I was worthless, because she couldn't bear watching me become what she never allowed herself to be. That wasn't my fault, I whispered. I know, and honestly. She sounded devastated by that fact. The sun lowered behind the trees slowly while nobody moved. Then Dad stood carefully using his cane and walked toward the porch, toward me. His left leg still dragged slightly from the stroke. But his eyes stayed steady. "You know," he said quietly, "your mother used to sketch buildings at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning." Mom looked down immediately. She was incredible. God. I suddenly understood why Dad kept every article about me, not just because he loved me, because every accomplishment I achieved reminded him of the woman my mother used to be before life hardened around her. "She stopped drawing after Ethan was born," Dad continued softly, "but every time one of your magazines arrived," he smiled sadly, "she read every page twice." I stared at my mother speechlessly. She never told me, never congratulated me, never asked questions. But she read every article, every single one. God, families are horrifying sometimes. People can love you deeply and still damage you beyond recognition at the exact same time. Mom stood slowly from the chair, and for one terrifying second she looked vulnerable, not polished, not controlling, just human. "I didn't know how to look at you without seeing everything I lost," she admitted quietly. Tears burned behind my eyes immediately, because honestly, that was the first truthful thing my mother ever gave me, not an excuse, a confession, and somehow that mattered more. 3 months after the reunion, American Heritage Architecture magazine released the October issue. My face covered the front page. God, even writing that still feels surreal. The photograph showed me standing inside the restored Pennsylvania train station beneath stained glass windows glowing gold behind me. Headline across the cover: "The Woman Saving America's Forgotten Places." Interesting title. Because honestly, I spent most of my life feeling like one of those forgotten places myself. The issue sold out in 2 weeks. Nora called laughing after the second print run. "You have angry preservation professors fighting over copies in Ohio." God, I framed that email, not the magazine, the email, because somewhere deep down, part of me still trusted written proof more than praise spoken aloud. My business exploded afterward. New contracts, conference invitations, historic preservation boards reaching out nationally. And suddenly, the same family who barely asked about my work spent entire phone calls discussing my career proudly to strangers. Interesting how success changes volume levels inside families. Aunt Brenda shared the magazine on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of our Clara, God." The woman introduced me as the daughter nobody talks about, suddenly acting like my lifelong supporter almost made me laugh out loud. Almost. Lily changed too, not dramatically. Subtly, she started calling more often, asking real questions, listening to answers fully. One afternoon, she admitted something while helping me shop for lighting fixtures in Boston. "I thought being the pretty one was pressure," she said quietly. "But I never realized being invisible was worse." God, that sentence healed something tiny between us, not everything, but enough to start rebuilding carefully. Ethan flew home for Thanksgiving that year, first time in almost 3 years. He stood in my office staring at project models spread across drafting tables and finally said, "I honestly had no idea your work was this big." Interesting, because that sentence perfectly summarized my entire life. Nobody knew because nobody looked closely enough. But the biggest change happened with my father. After the reunion, he started showing up at my office every Friday morning carrying coffee and newspaper clippings. Not always architecture-related, sometimes just buildings he thought I'd like, old libraries for sale, historic hotels under renovation, churches needing restoration grants, small offerings. His way of participating in my world finally. One snowy afternoon in December, he handed me an old cardboard box while sitting in the office kitchen. "What's this?" Found more photographs. Inside sat dozens of disposable camera prints from my childhood. Me sketching at the kitchen table, me building model houses from cardboard, me asleep beside architecture books in high school. God, my throat closed immediately. "You took all these?" Dad nodded once. "Your mother hated photos where people looked messy?" Interesting, because every photo Dad saved captured me becoming myself before anyone approved of it. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You saw me all those years." Dad looked down at the coffee cup between his hands, then quietly, "Seeing you and protecting you should have been the same thing." God, that sentence nearly destroyed me emotionally, because honestly, that was the missing piece. My father loved me, but love without action becomes silence eventually. And silence protects the loudest people in the room. Dad looked older after the stroke. softer somehow. Like surviving almost dying stripped away his ability to pretend emotional things weren't real. I failed you there, he admitted. No excuses, no defensiveness, just truth, simple painful truth, and honestly, that mattered more than perfection ever could. Spring arrived slowly that year. One rainy afternoon, my mother visited my office for the first time ever, not the public studio downstairs, my actual workspace upstairs, drafting tables, blueprint shelves, half-finished restoration sketches pinned to corkboards. She walked through the room silently touching things carefully, almost reverently. Then she stopped in front of my latest courthouse design. And for the first time in my entire life, my mother spoke to me like another architect. "The window proportions are smart," she said quietly. "You balance the facade without losing the original structure." God. No one else in the room could have understood how enormous that moment was. Not "that's nice," not "good job," real professional critique, respect. Finally, I looked at her carefully. "You still think like an architect." Mom smiled sadly. I never stopped. Silence settled between us softly, not fixed, not healed completely, but honest. Before leaving, Mom pulled something from her purse. One of the old attic sketchbooks, green spiral cover, edges worn soft with age. "I think these belong with you now," she whispered. God, I actually started crying immediately. Because that sketchbook wasn't just paper, it was proof. Proof that talent survived inside women even after life tried burying it. Proof that bitterness and love can exist together painfully. Proof that damaged people sometimes damage others simply because they don't know where else to place their grief. That night, after everyone left the office, I stayed alone at my drafting table flipping through my mother's sketches beside my own blueprints. 2 generations of unfinished women, 2 generations trying to restore what life almost erased. And honestly, that's when I finally understood something important. I was never ugly, never less important, never forgettable. Never the daughter nobody talks about. I was simply raised inside a room where nobody knew how to look at me correctly. But the beautiful thing about life is this: eventually you leave the room. Before you go, comment below. Do families sometimes decide who you are before they ever truly know you? And remember, the people who fail to see your value are not always proof you lack it. Sometimes they're just standing too close to their own pain to recognize yours.